Hey Bruce, thanks for joining me. It's
You're
really
welcome,
great
Tom.
to see you.
We've known each other a long time.
It's been a long time, and I missed the boat last couple of years when you were in
Right.
town, and I really felt bad about that because, to tell you the truth, you're the kind of story that I want to tell.
Oh, okay.
A minute ago, you were asking me about, what am I doing, and I was saying I'm kind of lost, but I that's not true. Lately, I've developed an idea, and we're moving ahead with it, where we're going to celebrate unsung Manitoba heroes
Oh, that's a
and
good
musicians.
idea. Yeah.
So one thing that's coming up is, have you ever seen the movie The Last Waltz?
That's one of my favorites.
Of course.
Yeah.
So inspired
Martin
by
Scorsese.
Yes. So there is friends Daryl and Angel, Daryl Sadmo and Angel Kalnick own a barn just north of the city, and they do all kinds of music shows and people that never really get to be exposed. So collaborating with them, I proposed an idea of my version of The Last Waltz.
Oh, good. That's a great
I want to
idea.
call it The Last Shuffle. So he's got the wicked band put together.
Oh, that's great.
And we're just gonna, parade Manitoba artists
Oh,
across.
that's a great idea.
I'm just gonna copy The Last Waltz.
No,
right?
that's a great idea.
I think so.
No, you can't make it better. I mean, you can make it
Right.
your version, but
That's it.
yeah, no, it was amazing. It's an amazing documentary.
It is, and that's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff I want to do. And sitting here with you today is just another step in that direction.
Cool.
To
Okay,
to
neat.
try and do stuff
No, that's
like
a great
that.
idea. Yeah.
I got to be honest. I've been really going to school on you the last few
Okay,
days.
stalking me.
Yeah,
Okay.
kind of. It's a little embarrassing, but there's some stuff of note that I wanted to talk
Okay,
about.
sure.
I really enjoyed reading that state of comedy in Canada.
Oh yeah, the Huffington Post.
Yeah. And just the stuff that you mentioned, like, we're a working class country. There's no daylight, long winters. We're jammed in, way too close in a party, and alcohol fueling us. Flashback, right? Because that's basically my life. And,
Right. Yeah.
And it hasn't really changed.
No, the demographics and the geography of Winnipeg, I really do believe it. I mean, Winnipeg, arguably, but I really feel strongly is probably one of the most creative cities in the world.
I would agree with you.
And I think a big influence on that is the weather and how we have to stay inside. And like I think I jokingly said in the piece, if you're at a house party and it's 30 degrees out and there's a whole bunch of people, somebody better be funny or there's going to be a fist fight, right? So, and I really believe that because, we grew up in Elmwood and, it was a rough neighborhood and everything. And, I don't know if you remember, but I was like the smallest guy in school.
For sure.
And the only guy smaller, in 8th grade, I don't know if you remember, but Mr. Hannock, the phys ed teacher,
Right.
he weighed us and measured us. I don't know why, maybe to keep track of us, but we had to weigh ourselves, and then he measured our height. And I was the second smallest guy in the school,
Holy
in
cow.
Elmwood High School. And the smallest guy was Dinky Davis.
That's right.
So Dinky, the guy's name was Dinky. And I was almost as small as a guy named Dinky. So I had to develop some kind of defense mechanism to not get my head kicked in every day. Because you grew up there, you know what it was like.
I
There's
know
a
what
bunch
it was
of
like.
mental cases that went to that school.
Oh, my God.
They're all in prison or they're dead or,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's where my humor developed. And I think if you...
Come here, Penny.
Come on, Penny.
Come on over here. Get in the shot. Let's
Come on
go.
here. There's the dog. Oh, yeah, I got a dog. So, but I think if you take that to another level... musicians are sort of the same way. I mean, you remember the artistic people in school were always the ones that took the brunt of the bullying and everything.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that had the visions and the talent and I really believe that because we're stuck in a room, you have to develop it or it naturally becomes part of you.
Yes.
So I really think that's why Winnipeg has so many creative people.
I thought it was interesting how you pointed out that comedians do it for attention because they don't sit around the house all day telling jokes, right? But musicians sit around writing songs and playing music, right?
Right. I think I think the difference between music and what's funny when I was a kid I used to watch the Tonight Show with Johnny, but I used to love it when like David Brenner or Shandling or any of the comedians would host. I used to love that. But I remember Carson talking about the idea that most musicians wanted to be comedians, that in his experience, and a lot of comedians wanted to be musicians. And, to be really honest, a lot of comics that I know are either amateur musicians or bad guitar players.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I play the guitar poorly. And, like, there's a couple guys actually in the circuit in Toronto. One is actually a really great musician, George Westerholm. He was playing in Big Sugar, I think, for a while.
Yes.
And, yeah, so... I think the difference between, you know, the musician generally, and this is just my observation, I don't even know if it's true, but the musician does it because they just love music so much they can't not play.
I have to agree.
You know, like, you know, because you deal a lot with musicians.
Absolutely.
And like you know, the Bryan Adams song, I played it till my fingers bled, right? The summer season. Well, this is when a guy discovers that guitar, it's like, oh my God, it becomes part of him. But comedians, I think, are more sort of outcasts and people who feel they haven't been paid attention to enough.
Yes.
And they want to do, and they take that leap, because it is a bit of a leap to get up there. And they do that, and then when that attention comes, it's like, oh my goodness, this is what I've been looking for. And I think that's definitely true.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, I have a closet secret desire to do stand-up.
Oh, is that right?
It's something that I've never had.
You should try it.
I know. I absolutely
There's lots of
should.
good open mics in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I have this fear that I'm going to step up there and go blank, but yet, you know, with my friends and stuff, I can entertain them and make them howl and spit their milk out through their nose.
So it's funny you say go blank. The very first time I ever did, it's exactly what happened to me.
I was going to ask you.
I wrote a bunch of horrible jokes. And there was a Yuck Yucks in the Osborne Village above a water bed store, right on Osborne.
I remember.
Village, remember?
Yes, I do.
It was the first Yuck. It was there for years, and that's where I started. And I got up on stage, and the thing you're not prepared for if you're not in show business at all, which I wasn't. Right. You are, you know, you do a lot of great tech stuff, and so you know what the lights do and all the sound does. Well, the light, I got up, and the light was so bright, I couldn't see anything. It threw me off, and then I just stood there. I'm not kidding, it seemed like 10 minutes, but it was like at least probably 15 seconds. And people started laughing because they thought it was part of the act. But I couldn't remember. And then the girl that I was seeing at the time yelled out my first line. And I went, blah, 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 and I did it. I think maybe I got one laugh on, you know, I was probably there 3 minutes, did some horrible jokes. But the rush of being up there brought me back.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I was in Toronto because I was a computer programmer at the time. And I went to Toronto on some conference. And there was a Yucks there, so I phoned because I was scared to go back to the. Well, okay, so let me backtrack. So one of the problems was somebody I worked with found out I was doing it, and they brought like 20 people to the club. My very first time, I was like, oh my God. And I wasn't embarrassed after. I just thought, okay, I can do it again. I felt a weird sense of confidence, even though it was just crazy. But then I went to Toronto and did it again, and I got up. And I started doing a few little jokes I had, and then some kid in the front row said something to me. I started late. I was like 27 or 28 when I started, and this kid was probably like 21 or 19. And my Elmwood kicked in, right? It was like, oh yeah, he's challenged me, right? Yeah. So, but then I started like banter, and I started nailing him with these lines that just came out of my head. And it was like people were going nuts, and I got off, and the professional comics from Toronto over there came over and said, "Oh, that was great. How long have you been doing this?" This is my second time, and they were like, "What?" They were so shocked, right? It was just a natural, and that goes back to being from Elmwood.
Yes.
And the big dummy coming up and wanting to punch you in the head, and you saying something funny or being witty, and deflecting, and trying to change the dynamics of the situation. That's exactly what happened. So then I came back to Winnipeg, and then on my fourth time, I actually started studying comedy and figuring out where my comedy should come from, and I wrote some decent, which I think is decent material. And went up and did it again, and then Elvira Kurt, who's she's an icon in Canada now, she came up to me and said, "Wow, how long have you done this?" This is like my fourth time. She was like, "Really?" Oh, and she was very encouraging. So that was the start of it all.
Wow.
But it came from that idea of like being in Elmwood and being,
yeah,
it's like a crucible, right? You either die or you get tough. You start lifting weights like I did later on.
Yep.
Like, because we used to go to the same gym together.
That's
and
right.
then, or you figure out how to fight, which I did because you had to, or you deflect and you learn to entertain other people, so they go, "Oh, this guy's okay." You know? So it was pretty interesting. Yeah.
Well, that to me that just says like you were meant to do it, right? When people are going, "Oh, how long you been doing this?" Forever, and you're telling them it's your third or your fourth time, and
Yeah. I was, and I got, and you try to be humble, but I was a natural at it. For some reason, I was just good at it.
Yes.
And it takes, like in any artistic venture, music, comedy, art, sculptures, being a great architect, you have to have a natural ability. Like I've written a lot of things about, can you learn to be funny? Well, you can't learn to be funny. You can learn to be better at it.
Yeah.
But that has to be a natural. Like guitar players who are great guitar players, they have a natural
Totally.
affinity for it and ability. But then the practice and just getting great at it is what makes them great, right?
And the technical thing, like doing sound for myself, I stepped up and I got it right away, right? You know,
Right, so that was something that was in your head.
it was, and I didn't know it was.
Because when we were a kid, I remember you were the one that introduced all of us goofy guys to like real music, like Pink Floyd. Because none of us were, we all. I think I can speak for most people that grew up in our neighborhood. We didn't grow up with books and music and art. It was a working class neighborhood that you had to work your ass off just to get by.
Yes.
My father worked the railway, and on the weekends worked other jobs to make money.
Yeah.
We didn't have books and music, and and I read stories of guys. Oh yes, my mother had Count Basie on the.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, you know. We had to do it. We did it ourselves, and you were one of the guys in the area that you were very precocious. Because I remember in 5th grade, you telling me how babies were born, which was hilarious, and it was so funny because it was totally wrong.
Of course,
but it was like we were like, really, and everybody was sitting there, and you're like, yeah, and this is what happens. All of us were sitting around in Mrs. Rosenbaum's 5th grade class.
Yes.
Was it 5th or 6th?
Probably 6.
6th grade, yeah, 6th grade. And you were telling us how we're like, oh, and I remember telling somebody, maybe it was even my mom or somebody telling, it's like, who told you that? Tom Kowalsky.
The beginning of fake news.
Yeah, exactly. But you were the guy that had the album, like you were the guy that had the Pink. I remember it was the Pink Floyd Animals album,
That's
I
it.
think, right?
That's it.
And we went to and you lived in a house, and there was an upstairs kind of loft,
That's
kind of,
it.
right?
You nailed it.
And we sat there and we listened to it, and it was
Yep.
like, oh my God,
On my
this is
Candle
amazing.
stereo with 4
Me
speakers.
and I can't remember who else was there, but it was like we were 12 or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were that guy.
That was
Yeah.
the beginning of really what got me into music and wanted me to be a part of it. Eh?
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And for some reason, because I haven't really, been in touch with your career, I didn't realize you were such a prolific writer. I really like your writing.
Oh, thank you.
You have
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
command of language, and I'm kind of an amateur writer myself.
Yeah, I kind of did that. I just sort of picked it up myself. Like and again, I just have kind of a natural. I'll tell you a story. So I never graduated from high school because I got cheating on the math exam in grade 12 in Elmwood, right?
I didn't graduate either.
Yeah. So, I mean, it didn't really matter. I really didn't care.
No.
And maybe I should have, but
I don't know.
Yeah. But then I went and worked the railway, and I knew I couldn't do it because it was like, it wasn't for me,
Yeah.
And I did that for like less than a year, and then a friend of mine at work got killed there on the site in Transcone, and I was like, oh my God, this is... And then on the Monday, the foreman said, okay, Clark, go do that guy's job. The guy got killed. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. And he's like, well, then you better go home. I said, okay. And I started walking. Okay, come back. And he sent some other guy who, went out and did it.
Oh, man.
Anyway, I knew it wasn't for me. And then I went back to school, got a computer programming certificate at night, and got into that business, right? But I remember there was a problem on one of these accounting systems, and I had fixed it. And I wrote a letter to the department to tell them that it had been rectified. Even it had been going on for months and nobody fixed it. And I went in and fixed it and sent this around. And the boss came and he had the letter, and he went like this. He said, "Who wrote this?" And I thought, "Oh, am I in shit? Like, what happened?" Like,
Yeah.
I go, "I did." He goes, "Oh, this is the best letter I've ever seen." And he walked away. That was it. So I was like, "Oh, that's weird."
Really weird.
And then I took when I worked for McLeod's in the same business, and they had a little class for writing, right? So I took it because I hated working, right? And anything to get out of it. So I signed up for this class. It was like a 2-hour thing at 9 o'clock in the morning. We went to the conference room, and the people delivering this so-called writing class, it was so bad. I finally stood up and said, "You know what? You guys, you don't know what you're doing." And people were like, "Oh, Clark's like, what an arrogant asshole," I said, "Here's the letter you wrote." And I went and I fixed it all. I said, "Change this, and even the guy that was running went, "Oh yeah, I guess you could do it that way." They all knew that, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
I just have a knack for words, and I love to read. So when I read sentences that make sense, it clicks in my head. It's
Indeed.
it's just there, And I'm writing a book actually about our Elmwood guy, Peter Frankfurt. You remember Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he has had quite a life, so it's very fascinating. So it's a treatise on violence and how it works in society, but also sort of a bio about him and what he went through in his life. Because he's really, I still see him. I'm going to see him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's still around.
Well, that's great. See, I admire that, right? Like, don't go after Leonardo DiCaprio or what.
Yeah, no, this guy, it's a great story.
It's got to be a great story.
Yeah. So it's really funny. He's very bright. Just had what a life he had, So, but yeah, I do love. Yeah, I've written a bunch of stuff for Huffington Post, the Free Press, the National Post. Yeah. So
I saw that. I really got a kick out of the way you talk about, you're the systems analyst, and
yeah.
what's with all this money coming into the house?
Oh yeah.
Right?
That was my joke. Yeah.
Because our big joke is I've literally made hundreds of dollars in the rock and roll business.
Right, exactly.
And we're constantly saying, so the parallel is close there.
Well, that's the thing about art, right? About music.
Yeah.
You either make nothing really, or just get by, or you're wealthy, right? So, and it has nothing to do really with talent or not. It doesn't have everything to do with talent.
No,
there's a lot of other factors that are
Yes,
involved.
indeed.
Luck and tenacity, and hitting at the timing.
Yes.
If Aerosmith came out today, would people go, oh,
What is this?
what is this, right? I don't know.
But there's a whole big thing about being yourself, right? Like, you're yourself, right? And I always have been myself, and I can't help it. And we have a sort of a similarity in that, I say stuff that maybe I shouldn't, and then I'm in
that's
trouble.
one of my,
but it's always calling it how it is, right?
Yeah, I think you got to be honest, and I think as I've gotten a bit older, I've learned that you can also be a little delicate, and you can sort of pick your fights.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you don't need to be. I don't need to be right all the time like I used to. You know what I mean? I used to have to always want to be right.
That's
but now,
my problem.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you can recognize there's a time and a place for it too. You know what I mean? Sometimes,
Yes. Yeah, that's my problem. Is it just doesn't go over well all the time. But
Yeah.
sometimes, you got to stick to your guns, right?
Yeah.
You talked about how we're underfunding the arts in Canada,
Yes.
and all that stuff. And I actually have a DVD for you. It's in the car. It's the Pumps movie.
Oh, I love the Pumps. I just heard them on the radio.
Yeah, well, it was, I worked for them for
That's right, I remember that.
13 years.
I remember
and
that,
toured
yeah.
with AC/DC and the whole bit. And finally, this fellow, Terry Goring Media, made a documentary about it called Just a Little Success. And I'm in it in some very embarrassing shots and big fuzzy hair and joint smoke all around me. Yeah, so we attended the premiere at the Park Theater, and it was like, oh boy.
Good. I'll have to see that.
Yeah, so I brought it with you to take back home because I didn't think you'd probably have an opportunity to see it. It
Yeah,
was only
I'd
on
love to see it.
MTS TV for a while.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
But where I'm going with that is that you talked about how we grossly underfund the arts and we're just the money isn't really going in that direction.
The problem in my view, the funding is, first of all, the artists don't get all the money or a lot of the money, or the people that are actually doing the real work. So if you know how to fill out some forms, you can any idiot can start a production company and write a proposal and then just send it, and you get some money.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is the sort of the socialist attitude of Canada, which can be good but can be bad, is that they try to divvy the money up instead of going, oh, this guy should get more because he did a really good job.
Yeah, he put the work in.
So when I did the comics episode on CBC, a long time ago, in like 96 or 90, it was a long time ago, I had a really good one, and it was like the second or third highest rated one out of the 20 they'd made. So I went back to the producers of CBC and said, hey, look, I've got tons of material. I can do another one. And the guy, and Joe Bodilai, God bless him, said, oh, well, not everybody's got one yet. So the attitude wasn't, let's promote our big, best and brightest. Let's make sure everybody has a chance.
Yeah.
Because it's like you know what I mean? So comics that really, in a lot of people's views, that should never have gotten a television special, got them just because of that attitude.
Yeah.
And so what that does, it takes away the value of the people who really have done the work.
That's the way I view it.
And that's the same thing if you look at the comics episode. It takes away the value of the people that are really good. So now when to get to the monetary side of it, so when people tune into the show and see a lesser comedian, now they don't say, well, that comedian's not that good. They go, oh, this comic show is really bad.
Exactly.
So, because it's government money, there's so many rules and regulations that it has to be divvied up. So I've advocated for just cutting it right off and let the marketplace take its place.
Which is many people would agree with you. Is the way to go. And and I talked earlier about my Last Waltz sort of copy thing, and that's why I'm doing it. Right. Don't want any funding. The agenda is people who have never had a grant. People who haven't plugged themselves into the Manitoba Music Association and got someone to write the proposal for them. People who are sitting at home making music And that's why, it's the same with
them.
artists here, right? The least celebrated artists and the ones who don't make it to the Winnipeg Art Gallery are sitting in studios making art.
For the sake of their art.
Yeah, and they just can't comprehend stopping for a month to write a proposal or be juried. That whole a juried show. Well, that costs a fortune.
Yes, and
starving artist, right?
Right. And then who gets to judge, right? I mean,
yes.
The judge is the consumer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is great.
Let the market dictate.
Let the market dictate.
So there's no. I own all the gear. So there's no financial impetus, behind it, and there'll be no charge for it.
Right,
I'll produce it all and put it out there.
That's great.
And hopefully, someone a little bit more exposure, like a network or MTS TV or something, will just pick it up and air it.
Netflix or somebody. Yeah,
it would be great.
Yeah.
It's going to be. I'm blatantly going to copy the format of the Last Waltz.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't think so.
No, I'm sure Scorsese would be quite pleased.
I hope so.
Have you seen the videos of where basically the camera overheats and melts the film at the end?
No.
So it's out there.
Oh.
So the Last Waltz, it kept like after the show that you see on the DVD is over.
Yes.
It went on for like a lot longer, but I think Clapton's on stage playing, and then all of a sudden the film just melts because the thing overheated. Just melted the film. It was on for so long, and back then the equipment was a lot different.
Yeah,
right?
huge cameras.
But it's a great. It's the greatest. I think the greatest music documentary made.
I agree. Yeah. I watch it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Some of the performances just move me to tears.
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah.
I read something about you writing a book on the gaming industry.
You know what? I started writing this book because oftentimes when things make me mad, I think, how can I do this? So that I was going to write a book on the gaming industry, and then somebody else, I think, was working on one about people who have committed suicide from. Losing all their money basically in the VLTs. So I did a whole bunch of research on it, and I just kind of gave up the idea. Yeah. So
you did.
It was a lot of work, and I wasn't sure. I read a ton of books about how the gaming industry, especially with the Aboriginal gaming industry in the United States, how it started with Foxwoods Casino, and how they couldn't find any Native Americans that were in that tribe because they'd been annihilated.
Yes.
So they found some guy and said he was a Pequot Indian, and it was really interesting. And then when they opened that South Beach Casino, I knew because I have a lot of First Nation friends who were in different forms of government things. I found out that it was like funded by private industry, and the deal was for like 20 years or something. They get like 80% of the profits, like a tremendous amount of money. Yeah. So because the government they didn't have the courage to do the whole thing themselves, which they should have done because it would have paid off.
Yeah, for sure.
Those people, it's a cheesy way to make tax revenue, really.
Yes,
it's
indeed.
Very harmful to society.
It's very harmful. Yeah. There's a casino right down the street from me, and I see it all the time. I don't see too many happy faces coming out.
No, you walk in there and it's all people that shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
And people can say what they want, but people who have money don't go to the casino.
No, I put $1 in a VLT the year they came out, and I didn't win, and I thought, well, that's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who lost. I have a friend whose brother-in-law lost everything, remortgaged his father's house that had been paid off for 30 years.
Yikes.
Lost that. I mean, then those stories are everywhere. There's thousands of them, but yet the government puts out their little ad. Gamble responsibly. Well, there's no such thing.
No, there isn't.
So don't just be honest. Look, we got it out there because we're going to steal your money because we're too afraid to raise taxes because we won't get voted in again. That's the real truth,
Well, and continuing on that theme and the government mishandling things, I got to tell you, as a hemp and cannabis advocate for 35 years, an investor in Manitoba Harvest Fresh Hemp Foods, which was hugely successful. I for 20 years I've been going around talking about the benefits of
you're right. You've been proved right.
I've been proved right, and when we announced that legalization was coming, sadly I was proved right again because I said they're going to fuck it right up.
Yeah, and of course it's government. They can't not fuck it up.
They can't. It's impossible, and I'm really saddened by what I'm seeing and the blatant lies about cannabis. I found a legal cannabis jar on the road, and I picked it up, and it said be advised that teenagers are more susceptible to cannabis addiction than other people. Right? Well,
right,
there
right.
is no cannabis addiction. It's,
Right,
it's
right.
habit forming. But
Yeah.
you know, many people don't know the facts that until the turn of the century, the absolute treatment for alcoholism was cannabis. The
Right.
doctor would have you smoke and smoke and smoke till your delirium
Yeah, some commie would
would
leave you. Yeah,
and the reason for that was because they knew you could just stop smoking.
Right.
There was, you know, and now I see, you know, just the way they mishandled it. But it's money, right?
Of course, it's well because you know when people started to quit smoking cigarettes, all the revenue started going down. Because
Yes.
I wrote a piece about the Manitoba Liquor Commission and how we should need to shut this crazy thing down. You should be able to just go to a Safeway and buy beer.
Absolutely.
Because this is you know it's the government run, and you know, and the other thing too is, well, people say, oh, you get tax dollars. We can still get the tax dollars. You just don't have to keep running these buildings and having government employees, you know, administer this. It's crazy.
It is.
It's hundreds of millions a year go to waste of that.
And it just fits in with their agenda. You know, you're looking at that creature over there, but you cannot chase it, all right?
Those are
I'm not even
squirrel.
going to say the word. I watched an episode of The Debaters.
Oh,
I really enjoyed that. And when I watched that last night, I thought, you know, that's the way to go with Bruce. We'll have a conversation. You know, I said I was going to interview you, but I'm not an interviewer, and you know.
The Debaters is one of the success stories of CBC.
Excellent.
So that radio show has been going for years now, and my friend Richard Sy created it, and he's no longer really associated with it because he's been there for years, and you know, there's been some changes, blah blah blah. But that's a success story. But this came from a guy who is creative and came with the idea, and the CBC finally got behind it. But here's the corollary: that was sort of one of the last comedy radio shows that's been successful, and it was like 9 years ago. There should be one every year.
Absolutely.
With the funding and the money they have, yeah. And same with their TV. You know, most of their TV has been horrible. The last few years they've picked it up a little bit, but there should be a successful show at least once a year.
Yeah, I don't understand it myself, you know.
Well, it's the government.
Yeah.
And they have their little clique of people they like to use, and you know, if you talk to anybody that worked on Air Farce or 22 Minutes,
Right.
There's guys there that have been working on the show that were never funny to begin with that are still there because it's the government. They can't get rid of them.
Yeah.
And they're the ones picking the jokes that should go on. And then you watch 22 Minutes and go, who wrote this? A 5-year-old? This is terrible. So, I mean, as much as, you know, these are all my friends that are on the show and they're talented, but they don't have all the power. Some producer that has no idea what they're doing, is not funny, picks the jokes, you know?
It's kind of, you know, the movie industry is just going crazy here. You reference it in something I read about how it's attracting, you know, the Hollywood producers from north of the...
yeah, well, they get a tax. I mean, they simply get a tax break.
Yeah.
So instead of it costing them $25 million to make a movie, they can do it up here for, you know, $15 million.
Yeah.
And that comes from the taxpayer, us taxpayers.
My point, exactly.
And it doesn't promote the Canadian talent at all.
Yes.
You know, like right now, Sean Penn's here wrapping up a movie.
Saw him yesterday.
So, yeah, and he's directing it, and he's probably the producer of it. So Sean Penn is taking our money. Is really what's happening.
And I have to tell you, he looks miserable as fuck while he's taking it.
Yeah,
he just looked miserable.
Yeah, well, he does look, because he's a chain smoker, right?
Yes,
so
he was smoking right in front of a no smoking place sign.
Yeah, so, he does that. Right. But there's people like, you know, cameramen and production assistants and producers and production companies here that make a lot of money.
Yep.
And they don't care that it doesn't help the
don't.
artist. They just want the money.
I have to agree with you. That is totally my experience.
And they don't give a shit if it's a Canadian experience. I mean, Canada shouldn't be making American movies.
No, exactly.
So, this idea that we have this thriving film, that we don't.
No.
Name 5 Canadian films, like real Canadian films.
No, can't.
The Fast Runner was great.
Yes,
those are Canadian movies that should be made.
Well, my son married a lovely young lady named Stephanie Ann Cotter, and then one day, he said to me, "Hey, we're going over to Steph's place to get all her grandpa's slides and stuff." And I went, "Oh, what did he do? Cotter's Eye on Canada? He did those little
vignettes.
That's right.
Oh,
and
neat.
It sounded to me like that stuff was going in the garbage, right? And
yeah, it's a more of a worldwide place now, right? With communications, it's like one big. The world is connected, right?
Yes.
As you know.
Yes.
but we still have our own culture that's totally different than the American culture, and it should be selling. People say, well, do you want to get rid of the CBC? No, I don't want to get rid of the CBC. I want to make it better.
Yes, indeed.
Because it does connect the country. I mean, if you're up in, Dauphin, you can still listen to the CBC and be connected to Canada, or even the Paw, or Tuktoyaktuk, or wherever. Yep. You're still connected to the country.
I listen to CBC it's important. All the time, yeah.
But yeah, but as far as Canadian movies, The Fast Runner was great. That Barbarian Invasions. Quebec makes great Canadian movies, but they're Quebecois movies because they have their own culture too, and they don't care about the American. They make their own movies.
They do, yeah.
And they produce people like Denny Arcand and that who make fantastic films.
And it kind of saddens me with all those producers coming from south of the border and doing this, and still we have no iconic Winnipeg movies.
Other than Guy Madden's, which is they're not accessible to some people, and I mean, fan or not, they're odd kind of films. Yep. They're interesting, but they're not broad enough to attract an audience, really. I mean, not many people see them. I mean,
no,
yeah.
I don't know many people who've seen them.
No.
But can we go back in time a bit and,
sure.
and talk about, what you said you started late, but what triggered the decision? There must have been a point where, did you just say, I'm going, or?
When I started doing stand-up?
Yeah, and the move to L.A.,
Okay, so I'll tell you what happened. So I was working as a computer programmer for Manitoba Data Services, which was, of course, the government, an NDP-run government centralized. There was a centralized processing system, so the government bought all the computers, and then all the government departments used those computers, right? The idea is probably sound, but anyway, I hated working in an office. I hated that. I just didn't like it. And then one day I was at home, and I saw this television show on CKND, local network, and it was the Yuck Yucks Funniest Comedian Contest, and it was for all new comedians. And Kerry Talmadge was the host, and they had, you could sign up and you enter this con. And I watched, and I thought, this doesn't seem. These guys aren't funny, my first reaction. So the next year, that's when I started. I thought, I think I can do this. I always loved comedy, and like I said, when I watched the Tonight Show, I loved watching the comedians. I loved seeing the stand-ups. And so that's when I started, like I said, doing the stand-up. And then the next year I entered that contest. I'd only been doing stand-up for... The first time I did it was like February... No, it was the summer. The evolution was I did it one time in the summer in Winnipeg. That was the time when I blanked out. And then in December, that's when I went to Toronto. That's the time I did okay. So when I came back from this thing, right after Christmas that year, that's when I started going to the club. And they had amateur night Wednesday and Thursday, so I started going. And then I entered the contest because the guy that owned the club said, you got to go in this contest because we need guys that are funny, not just a bunch of people signing up. So myself and Erwin Barker, God rest his soul, entered this contest, and I won it. So, but in the meantime, I'd only been doing stand-up for like 3 months, and I got put on an American tour with this guy, and I was the opening act.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and within a year, I was headlining, which is like completely unheard of.
No kidding.
Yeah, I headlined in Winnipeg in a year, and within like 2 years, I was headlining all the clubs, and I thought, well, I got to get out of here, because Winnipeg's not gonna. I mean, I'm at the end of my kind of rope.
Yep.
And so Breslin, who owned all the, he said, "Why don't you move to Toronto?" I didn't want to move to Toronto because it was just the same, more the same. So I moved to LA, and so I started in stand-up in like '89, I think, and in '95 I did the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
So it took me 6 years, and the average is 10 or 11.
Yeah, that sounds like a short period of time
to
get to that.
Yeah,
level.
I got, I was fortunate. I was able to write jokes that were funny and not hacky, and sort of original, and so then getting to LA, and then that opens up a whole Vegas. I was doing lots of stand-up in Vegas. I was showcasing in LA all the time, meeting people, and that's the big thing. You're in the real business. It's like I always say, if you're going to be a downhill skier, you don't move to Saskatchewan. You move to somewhere where there's mountains, right?
Aspen.
or wherever, right? If you're going to be a kayaker, you got to go where there's whitewater, right?
Yes.
So in show business, if you're going to be an actor, you either got to go to New York or LA. If you're going to be a stand-up, you go to New York or LA. There's only two places.
And to expound on that a bit, it's totally the same in the technical end. Any of my friends who are huge in the world of production have just moved. Like my best friend worked here for a local company for 12 years, making $15 an hour, and then that company tried to open a Vegas location, and there in that Vegas location he met the people who are really in the business, and you know
they recognize his talent.
Yes, exactly. And the owner here was like on the phone going, just undercut everybody, you know, that's the way it's done, just find out what they're charging and go in there and introduce yourself. And he just went, yeah, no, I found out the lowdown here, and that's how you end up in a hole in the desert, right? I've been told, you know, if you can exist for a year, then people will start to take you serious. But my friend in particular is such a great personality and wonderful at meeting people that they recognized his talent and went, yeah, dump this guy, work for us. And now he literally makes 20 times what he made here, and his schedule in the next few weeks is Toronto, New York, Florida, Austria.
You know, where he's in the real business.
He's in the real business, and so well respected because he deserves to be, right? And it's the same story, right?
And it's not easy. I mean, there's lots of people that go that they just don't get anywhere mostly because it's either one of two things: they really don't have what it takes, or they're just hard to work with, right? So. And it's a business, so you have to apply some sort of business model to it.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of stuck in the middle there. I think I have what it takes, but I'm really hard to work with. Can you talk about social media a bit, because it's ruling our lives? I mean, most of the stuff I do is on Facebook, and I got to tell you, like, just to jump back a bit, what I really love about your style of everything is that, you know, you got your Gilbert Gottfrieds and your Howard Sterns and stuff, and it seems to me anybody can do toilet humor, right? I could rattle off expletives deleted for an hour and make funny fart jokes, and you know, it's just pandering to the common denominator.
I mean Gilbert's funny. He's got some great stuff.
Not take it away from him.
And Howard, I mean, if you look at him now, like, he talks about his old days and how he's like embarrassed about what he used to do.
He does, eh?
I mean, if like I have Sirius radio, I listen to him, and I think he's one of the best interviewers around. He's he's very smart. He's not stupid. But to get back to social media, it's the old thing. It's great and it's bad. I mean, a lot of times I won't know something's happening unless someone posts on Facebook. And I go, oh, that's a neat article. I'll read it. Well, that's fine. I would never have known about that.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it's everybody's on there talking about what they think, and you know, you just gotta.
Yeah, you guys talked about it on. There was a sort of impromptu conversation at the Comedy Fest with several people I just watched this morning, and you know, the one fellow way on your right was talking about how, yeah, my mother died. She made this great recipe, and what do I do? Do I hit like? Or...
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
Exactly,
and, you know, and. For me,
like Facebook will say, hey, it's so-and-so's birthday, and the guy's been dead for 3 years,
exactly.
right?
And I actually use social media and Facebook a lot for my own, you know, nefarious purposes.
But it's great for communicating with your group and your people. I mean, it's what I like about it. Like, I got to see a lot of the old people that we grew up with, and see what's happened to them. It's just because I'm fascinated by human behavior, so I like to see what, you know what I mean?
Yes.
See what's happened to people, and that's how I reconnect with Peter Frankfurt too, right? It was Facebook.
So there's the value right there.
There is a value, yeah, for sure. But
one of the big things about that is being able to exploit it. And when Trump became president, one of the first things I did when I have a YouTube channel about RC drone flying, and I started posting in my titles stuff like, you know, my drone trumps all others, right?
Yeah.
And immediately I noticed I was getting like 1,000 more views.
Oh, because the word Trump was in there.
Yes, and I felt kind of sneaky about it, but I kept sneaking it in there, right? And it was only then that, you know, like a year ago when 2 years ago I started doing that, I really started to realize how manipulative this could be, social media, and how.
Well, think about how it's used and by the power of the people in power, and exactly, it's pretty interesting.
So we're back. I ran and got from the car this Pumps DVD for Bruce, a little present for him to take home, because I figured he'd never really get to see it if I didn't give you.
Thank you. That'll be great. I want to see that. Yeah, Chris Gaffney. These guys were great, though.
Yeah, what a band, you know.
The Pumps and Orphan, right?
So you moved to California, and how did that go when you arrived? Because I can't even imagine that. Like,
it was like starting over again, so it was really hard.
It must have been expensive.
Yeah, I mean, you get there and, like, it's funny you say expensive. So we had a little house in on Maplewood, just off Osborne there, in like sort of like, I don't know, it's called Crescentwood or
Right.
whatever that area. And then so we sold it for like 89,000. And then we moved to LA, and then first we moved to Palm Springs because my wife got a teaching job there. But the rents were like, it was like $1,000 a month at that time. I was like, oh,
That's
boy.
huge.
And I had no income really because I
Right.
was starting over. So we got there, and like a week later, I flew back to Canada to do like 2 weeks of stand-up to make some money. And then, fortunately, I got hooked up with a guy named Steve Sharippa, who actually ended up starring on The Sopranos as Bobby Bacala.
Oh, wow.
And he was the maitre d' at the Riviera Hotel where the Improv was. So he hired me all the time, and then he got me other work. And so he was, he's still a good friend of mine. And that helped. And then I started getting into the stand-up scene, and then I started writing. So I had some pretty good writing jobs for a while. So I wrote on a couple sitcoms, and I sold 2 pilots, one to Comedy Central, one
Oh,
to
wow.
VH1. And then I wrote on a Canadian sitcom for a year that we shot in Vancouver. And then I wrote actually some animated series like for Louis Anderson and for
I watched it.
Birds, and there was a bunch of different shows that were being made. So yeah, I made a living at it. Yeah. So it was, but it's not easy. I mean, it's
No.
not easy. And you have to, you get to, I used to work at the Magic Club a lot in Hermosa Beach, so I met a lot of, like I met Shandling there and Kevin Nealon and Howie Mandel. I came this close to getting a job. He wanted to hire me he had a talk show for a while, but he ended up hiring like someone that his manager also managed. So
Of course.
yeah, but that's how it works.
It is.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good fun. Yeah.
So when you moved there, and when did you get to the point where you were comfortable, like, and thought, okay, I'm safe now. I can.
Well, you never feel safe in any show business. If you
No.
talk to even successful actors, like
as good as your last movie or as good as your
yeah,
last
and then
show.
they always, like, I remember listening to, like, even Tom Hanks was saying, after you finish them, you always worry, well, am I going to get another job somewhere?
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, which is ridiculous on its surface, but
So you come home a fair amount.
I try to come back in the summer because
I know it's the summer, which makes total sense.
Yeah, that's right. I was here at Christmas this year too, but yeah, I still have lots of friends and family here, so you miss them, you want to see them,
Well,
So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
that's great.
Yeah.
And thanks so much for joining
Thank
me.
you, Tom. It's so nice to see you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time.
All right, folks, this next guy has never accepted the mundane life of working a 9 to 5. Every job he's ever had, he's been shit-canned by 3:30. Please welcome Bruce Clark.
Hello, Winnipeg. I'm back home. All right. Oh, this is great to be back here. Before I started doing stand-up, I was a systems analyst, and I was making about $85,000 a year at a company. I had benefits and holidays, and one day I came home and said, hey, enough of this money coming into the house. I can make hundreds of dollars a month doing stand-up comedy. The truth is, I've never actually had to quit a job. It's true, because I've been fired from every job I've ever had. Yeah, the last boss told me I was an opinionated contrarian, and I said, well, first of all, I disagree. And in my estimation, I think you're the worst manager I've ever had. So I had this computer job, and I thought it was going to be great. I'd have my own office and my own phone. It'd be kind of neat. I'd wear a tie. It'd be great. I'd be a professional. But it was horrible. It was so boring. I couldn't stand it. But fortunately, the place I worked at actually had a movie theater right next door to it. So I'd tell the boss I was going to go see a client, and then I'd go to the movies. I'd see 3 or 4 matinees a week, And so one day he calls me and says, okay, who's this client you keep seeing? I said, Harrison Ford. Yeah, you got to have an education, though. I actually never graduated from high school. And for years, I just tell people I was an undergrad. Because I was terrible in school. I actually failed grade 9 mathematics 4 times. Yeah. No, wait. 3 times. Okay. So if you don't have an education, you got to get a job. And so the first job I got was a job at the railway, you know? First day, the guy comes over, the foreman says, okay, here's the job. We've got a big pile of spikes. You take 50 spikes, you put them in a bag. You put 9 of these bags on this pellet. 2 pellets in the morning, 2 pellets in the afternoon. And I go, okay, perfect. And then he goes, how many spikes is that? Is there a movie theater around here anywhere, huh? But I mean, I know that an education is important now because I actually married a special ed teacher. Yeah, that's how I met my wife. So, yeah, it's great though because she works with adults actually, people who are have mental challenges, low IQs, and learning disabilities, and it's perfect for our relationship because when she gets home, I look like a genius. I don't know, this job, everybody says, oh, stand-up comedy, that must be really hard. You get in front of people and talk to them. That's not that bad. You know, there's a lot tougher jobs, you know? Like, the toughest job, I think, in the world is a rodeo cowboy, you know? You know what I mean? You ever seen these bull riders? They're amazing. They're the toughest guys in the world, you know? Hockey and football, you got helmets, all kinds of padding, auto racing, asbestos suit, fire extinguisher, huh, you know? Bull riding, a felt hat. All right, buddy, hang on for as long as you can. In the event you get knocked off, just before that 2,800-pound beast is about to disembowel you with that razor-sharp horn and then proceed to stomp your brains into the dirt, that little clown is going to save you. I don't know why. You know, later in life, I learned why I was so bad at jobs. I literally was fired from every job, and I found out later because I started seeing a psychiatrist because I was having some depressive problems. You know, I didn't even know I had the depression until I saw an ad for it on television for depression medication. Yeah. I'm sitting there looking, and this TV comes on. It's like there's a woman crying in the bathroom. Like, what the hell is this? Jeez. All of a sudden, they start listing the symptoms for depression. You know, do you hate getting out of bed in the morning? Well, yes, I do. Do you find yourself drinking a lot of alcohol? Well, yes, I do, son of a bitch. These people know me. And then the kicker, do you hate going to work? Yes, I do. All these years, I thought I was just a lazy bastard. I've been in dire need of medical attention. Thank you very much, Winnipeg. You've been great. Thanks so much. Take care. Thank you.
That's it, folks. That's our Quit Your Day Job show. We hope we inspired you to quit your day job and pursue your dreams too. Unless you are the only doctor in a rural town, in which case maybe save your ukulele for your own time. Thanks, Winnipeg. I'm Johnny Harris.